So the topic is still family literacy and frontier colonial objects, and deficit thinking, which was the topic of my thesis. But what I wanted to do today is try and focus a little bit more kind of on like the methodology and kind of thinking of my thesis as a journey, which is not a terribly original metaphor, but I'm going to start with that metaphor. And as I go through the presentation, I'm going to sit down. As I go through the presentation, I will be bringing up some other metaphors as well. And metaphors were really, really important in that journey of doing my thesis. So I wanted to just start with this photograph. When I did my defense, the only slide I had was this slide that's up on the wall. And another slide that's just the photograph without any text on it. And the reason for that is this particular view became a really important metaphor as I was doing my thesis in all sorts of different ways. And I'm just going to read a little bit that's from my presentation that I did at my defense that talks about this photograph. So my thesis was written in a particular place. Treaty 4 land, the traditional land of the Cree, Saulteaux, Lakota, Nakota, Dakota, and Métis people. It starts with me as something like a 5th generation white settler, learning to see myself as a treaty person, to see my relationship to this place in new ways. Looking at outside the window of the University of Regina Library one day, early in sort of my analysis phase, I recognized layers of history and identity shaping the land. The way the land is both Indigenous and colonized, or Aboriginal and Canadian. This context has shaped my analysis as I have come to recognize retrospectively and going forward that our relationships, including relationships constituted in and by family literacy programs, are shaped by the histories that shape that land. Intertwined with this recognition is my developing understanding of the way that the myth of the fort and colonial frontier logics, notions from Dwayne Donald, shape family literacy practice in Saskatchewan. So I started my presentation with this photograph, but my understanding of this photograph came sort of maybe 2/3 of the way through this whole journey of doing my thesis. And what I recognized at some point was that I had always been there. That was always the place that I was doing this research. But that the meaning of that kind of was not part of my initial thinking about the thesis. There's a lot of things about this photograph, and I go back to the photograph later in the presentation, but there's a lot of layers to what's going on in this photograph. One of the things that was evident to me early on was kind of the isolation of that photograph. I did a presentation about 2 years ago in the UK talking about my thesis. At that point, I was kind of just beginning the analysis and just beginning to think about this photograph. And I showed them the photograph, and that's the thing that they remarked on most, was that there was nobody in it. There's one person in the photograph. But that's kind of how I did my research to some extent. I mean, you know, doing a thesis, it's always isolating. For me, I was here, my program was in Toronto. I have 2 kids at home that I actually homeschool. So I was doing this work, this was probably like a Sunday morning, right, at the university library. Sometimes I was doing sessional work and had an office, and sometimes I didn't have an office, and so, you know, Sunday morning at the library, staring out the window, this is what I would see. What I'm going to talk about in the presentation is sort of beginning to locate this research, and specifically locating myself, locating the field of family literacy, and then locating the research, and all kind of within the metaphor that is this photograph. Okay, so just just talking a little bit about family literacy. I'm making an assumption that we have some idea of what family literacy is, but coming from where I am, I was an adult literacy practitioner and a BAL educator working with new immigrants. And the family literacy work that I did was working with families, 2 generations usually of a family, and talking about the ways that we could support literacy development in the family, both of children and adults. So that was kind of my perspective on family literacy. That was where I came from. And that's sort of generally how we see it in the field. And what I was particularly interested in were a couple observations that I made. And the first one was that deficit thinking is like tenaciously present in family literacy. The critique of deficit thinking is as old as the field of family literacy itself. Family literacy as a field wasn't really defined until about the late 1980s. And almost immediately there were academic conversations about deficit thinking within family literacy and the way that we blame families for not doing literacy well enough in the home. At the same time, I already have it up there, but at the same time, the field generally, so the field of practice of family literacy programs is rhetorically committed to strengths-based practice. And this conversation of deficit thinking is not just something that takes place in the academic literature, it takes place in the field. So people working in family literacy programs are aware of the fact that family literacy programs are criticized for being deficit-based, and they commit themselves to this alternative model of strengths-based practice. And so my initial kind of research question was around this tension, and how is it that even though we have rejected deficit thinking in the field, we continue to reproduce it, and programs continue to be shaped by it. And this was something that, again, was not just in the academic literature, but this was something that I was feeling from my own experience as a practitioner. I could see both of those things in the field. Sort of on a daily basis, which I will maybe go back to a little bit. I'm trying to think of my research methodology. I had a lot of problems, and this is, not super uncommon for a PhD student, that you're not really sure what your methodology is. And I looked at all different kinds of methodologies, and none of them felt like a fit. These are the ones that kind of stood out the most for me. So I came to the field of literacy, and I came to research in the field of literacy already from a feminist perspective. I was already interested in post-structuralism, and my whole thinking about what I wanted to do in terms of research had been shaped by that. I was influenced by something called New Literacy Studies, which is sort of partly where the academic piece of family literacy practice came from. So this was research that was usually genealogical research. So researchers were going out into the field, in communities, and observing how families and how communities use literacy. So I was influenced by that. There was also sort of a critical discourse analysis strain to that work, and I was interested in that, but it didn't seem to quite fit. I looked at narrative, didn't seem to quite fit. I just looked at all of these different approaches, and none of them quite fit. What I finally told myself, or what I not told myself, what I finally said in my proposal, and how I kind of framed my research originally, was that it was sort of an emergent methodology informed by feminist genealogy and ethnography. And that did kind of describe what I was going to do. I was pretty sure from fairly early on what I was going to do. There were some shifts to it, but I had a good idea. I wanted to get kind of an in-depth look at the field of family literacy. And so I wanted to look at documents, and so I did a whole bunch of kind of policy analysis, which had its own kind of challenge within the field because there's sort of an absence of policy. I wanted to do some observation, and I wanted to observe, again, sort of at different levels of the field. So I ended up observing both at workshops for training practitioners, as well as in programs themselves. And I wanted to do interviews. So I interviewed practitioners, both the practitioners in the programs, and I interviewed some of the participants in those programs as well. But then I interviewed practitioners in the field in Saskatchewan who've been involved in this sort of for a long time, and who I knew to have some kind of commitment to something other than a deficit approach to family literacy. So that was kind of what I did, and this methodology question continued to be pretty unclear to me. As I was Okay, so as I was trying to write my dissertation itself and thinking about what the methodology was, I thought a lot about metaphors again. And one of the metaphors that really was significant to me was kind of, that seemed to describe what was going on, was kind of this notion of a meandering stream, which is kind of, similar to the notion of a journey, except maybe a journey, you have an idea where you're going, and the stream's just kind of meandering, going back and forth, you're not really sure. I also thought about spaces, moments, and bodies. So Sarah Ahmed's work was really influential to me, and the way in which she talks about really particular moments in which you're aware of the way in which your body is oriented, the way in which what you're facing and what you're turning your back towards. And so, thinking of that meandering stream, and then thinking of kind of the places that you land along that journey down the stream, and then looking at them kind of from new perspectives and in new ways. The notion of layers kept coming up to me, and so in that very first photograph, talking about the layers that are present there, the stream became really significant. And again, Dwayne Donald talks about this notion of pentimento, which is the idea of scraping away layers of a painting to see what's hidden underneath. And specifically, he's talking about it in terms of sort of the Indigenous history of Canada and what we're covering over and what we might find underneath. So that became an important metaphor for me. Weaving, quilting, braiding, just all seemed really appropriate. And I think the next one is, yes, and knitting. So I am a knitter. I haven't been able to knit for 4 months, so that's a little sad, but I am a knitter, and especially during my coursework, but even later, I found like I knit a lot, like much more than I had before I had started the thesis. It became a way to, ground myself back in my body and do something that was sort of straightforward but creative, and like you had a product at the end of it, as opposed to kind of this being lost in not really knowing what you're doing or where you're going. So I knit a lot, and this notion of knitting in the round, and how when you knit in the round, you knit in a spiral when you knit in the round. If you're not a knitter, you might not know that, but it knits in a spiral. And of course, the spiral is also a metaphor both for popular education, which is kind of partly where my background comes from, and also in action research, which I haven't mentioned here. But so this notion of you keep coming back to the same things and looking at them from a new perspective and in a new way. Okay, was that the last of the, oh, no, there's one more. And then this idea of Indigenous, or not Indigenous métissage. So that's kind of grayed out there because that was not something that I thought of originally, certainly, and I'm not claiming that my work is an Indigenous métissage. Early in my process of planning the research, so I spent 1 year in Toronto, just in Edwardsie for 1 year. I did all my coursework in that year, and partly what I was trying to do in that course was figure out this methodology question. And one of the courses that I did was an arts-based research course. And in that, the notion of métissage was discussed. And early on, I thought that was really going to shape my methodology. I was interested in kind of narratives and the layering of narratives and the bringing of narratives, which is very much what métissage is about. In the end, that didn't seem right, and I kind of moved away from that, although there were pieces of that certainly I can see throughout my research process. But then later, as sort of after I was done with the analysis and I was still trying to name what I'd kind of done, I started looking more deeply at Dwayne Donald's work and his notion of Indigenous métissage. So having taken this notion of braiding narratives, but specifically focused around Aboriginal Canadian relationships, and that was really important to me. So this is actually kind of more what I think of as my methodology than those kind of theoretical things that I had on that other slide, all that stuff. But this, yeah, did you want to say?
Yes, just at this stage, Stacey, quick question.
Yep.
When you say Aboriginal Canadian relations, did you say that?
Yep.
When you say Canadian, do you mean white? does Canadian incorporate all the other Canadians who are not white? Are you meaning white or more than that?
Again, I think that there's layers to that. So, and I'm taking that language from Dwight Donald himself, who's mostly talking about European settlers and Aboriginal Canadians. For me, that question is a little bit unresolved. I might fit in a little bit later. But in family literacy programs, one of the things about them is that practitioners are mostly white. The time I was doing family literacy programs, practitioners were almost all white. That's shifted a little bit. And participants are mostly either Aboriginal or non-white, English language learners, New Canadians. So that question is not something I resolved in my thesis, but is something that's sort of an ongoing issue that I'm thinking about. So maybe we'll come back to it too in a little bit. Okay. And then this quote became really important to me too. So this notion of storytellers and the notion of the way in which our own story is part of the research, and recognizing too that part of what this is about too is that I talked about that research journey at the very beginning, and how that's maybe a bit of a cliche metaphor for research. Part of what this notion of research, history, and narrative method reminds me is that the research journey is kind of this one part of a story that's like bigger, right? That started before and goes on afterwards. Which I think will take me to locating myself. So, okay, there we go. So I talked a little bit about this already. So I was an adult and family literacy practitioner before I ever was a researcher of any kind. My particular journey to becoming an adult literacy and research practitioner was not completely unusual, but maybe not completely the standard journey. I actually got into doing literacy work because of a feminist theory course that I took after I had finished my undergrad, and I was like, my undergrad was in philosophy, and I had like no idea what I was going to do. I was in the early 1990s, and there were no jobs for people with just a BA. And so I had a lot of kind of crappy jobs, and I kept going back to the university to take courses. And for a while, I took a bunch of women's studies courses. And it was actually in a feminist theory course that I read bell hooks, feminist theory from margin to center. And there's a whole chapter in there about literacy, which is something I'd never really thought about before. And I wrote a paper about women in education, and then I did another course, and I did a paper about literacy, and then I kind of decided, like, I'm sort of tired of reading and talking about these things. I want to actually do something. And I went and I started volunteering in literacy programs, and eventually ended up working in the field. So my orientation towards literacy practice was always a feminist orientation towards literacy practice. And as I learned more about education, community education, adult education, I was inspired most by popular approaches to education and Paulo Freire, which is also something I had read before I ever started working in literacy. So I had this kind of like vaguely unusual kind of theoretical orientation to this very practical work that I ended up doing. And I mean, that wasn't why I stayed in it. The reason why I stayed in it was because I actually found I really loved doing it. Like I just really loved being a facilitator of education, I guess. My work was pretty much always in community-based settings. I did a little bit of work in more institutional kinds of settings. I worked a little bit at SciAst. I worked in the ESL program at the university, but most of my work was all very community-based and participatory, and that's where I was coming from. And it was through adult literacy that I kind of fell into doing family literacy work, because it was kind of a trend. It was, it was around 2000 when I started getting paid to do adult literacy work, and there was funding available for family literacy work, and we were always looking for funding, and there were moms in our programs that required childcare to come to our programs, and family literacy could do that, and so we started doing family literacy work. At the time, I was not a mother, so I was a relatively young, idealistic literacy worker who was going to teach moms about how to support their children's literacy development. And I had some training in like early literacy, and that was kind of it, and I just went in and was telling them what to do. My practice evolved so that what I started doing was a little bit different. I kind of moved away from that approach to family literacy. That was certainly where it started. Later, I was a mother, but this was mostly after I had stopped doing family literacy work. It's actually during my master's degree, when I also researched family literacy, that I became a mother. And it really shifted that work. And there I am. This picture is old. I think it's maybe from the summer before I started my PhD, or maybe the summer before that, so 7 to 8 years ago. This is me and my 2 kids reading on this really ugly chair that we have at our cottage. And somehow taking this picture has become a tradition. So we take a picture like this every summer at the cottage, and I think probably it's possible that this is my Facebook profile picture right now. It's the current version of this photo. I show that picture because this is like the stereotypical picture of family literacy work, or what family literacy looks like. This is the kind of thing that we promote in family literacy programs, like read to your children 15 minutes every day. Right? And although I was critical of that discourse, I was also embedded in it, and my mothering was shaped by it, right? And I mean, not only am I so here, there's a little bit more here, I think. Oh, what happened? Did I do something?
Press the button on the top.
Turn it into a laser, and I'll push it again to go back.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Oh, okay, I'm missing something on the slide. So, I mean, not only am I a mother, on the next slide, but I'm also like a middle-class white mother, right? So a particular kind of mother. I'm also a mother with a disability. So, I am able to approach the ideal of motherhood in some places and not in other ways. But I'm very much shaped and embedded in that, ugly, fluffy chair at my cottage and that discourse of family literacy. So, and then in my thesis, the third thing that I talk about in terms of my identity is my identity as a white settler. So, I mentioned that my family, I'm sort of 5th generation, it depends which part of the family you count from, but my, great-grandparents mostly came to the West, Manitoba and Saskatchewan as homesteaders, or sort of right after the homesteaders buying their land from failed homesteaders. And my parents both grew up in farms in rural Saskatchewan and rural Manitoba. I've lived my whole life on the prairies. So that's very much a significant part of my identity. There we go, there's the white middle class mother. But it wasn't something I was thinking about when I started doing my research, in really any way. I was thinking about the fact that I was white and that I was middle class. And I was aware, especially when I went away to Toronto, I was very aware that I was from the prairies. I grew up in Winnipeg on Treaty 1 land, and I've been in Saskatchewan and Regina for like 18 years, I think, other than that 1 year in Toronto. So going to Toronto, I was very much aware of my identity as being from the prairies. But I wasn't sort of thinking of myself as a white settler as I started to build this problem. Okay, so the next thing that I wanted to talk about and that I was trying to do my research was to locate family literacy. And this was really important as I was trying to look at policy documents for family literacy. What is family literacy? What counts as a family literacy policy document? It's not easy. There isn't like a family literacy curriculum. There isn't like a family literacy act. In the United States, there isn't here. There isn't a family literacy course. There are a couple courses, but there's not like one course that people take and become a family literacy practitioner. So looking for policy is a little bit hard. It's hard to know where to look. Often, family literacy work is kind of described as being at the intersection between adult literacy and early childhood literacy, because we both work with adults to help them support their literacy, and we work with children to help support their literacy, and usually young children. But that really kind of like hides the complications of what family literacy work is, kind of in the real world. Family literacy is located in many different, I guess, policy discourses and many different kinds of organizations. These are only a few of the places that we see family literacy work, and each one of those is obviously also embedded in other kinds of policy discourses. I mean, I noticed on here I have nothing about EAL or about settlement work, which a lot of family literacy in Saskatchewan happens in that context. And there's, so it's parenting, education, family support work, and family resource centers is a place that family literacy work happens pretty often. Early childhood education, and just like daycares, a lot of family literacy work happens. And all of these different places are funded by all sorts of different government departments and private organizations, and all have different kinds of accountability and different mandates. And they all do something that they call family literacy work. And relatively rarely do they kind of come together as something you could call a family literacy field. And this is particularly true since the federal government cut so much adult literacy funding across the country, so that the networking organizations, a lot of them don't even exist anymore. So family literacy programs are just really isolated and located within these other larger policy discourses. So we could think of family literacy as kind of being in the middle of this, but really it's not. It's like this, right? It's all over the place within those discourses. So some family literacy work is very far removed from K-12 education. Some of it actually is taking place in the schools. And sometimes that work taking place in the schools has very little influence from sort of an adult education or an adult literacy perspective. Sometimes those things are working together. It's just kind of all over the place. And there's no one funding pot, there's no one set of policy documents, there's no one curriculum. So sort of locating this policy discourse was a bit of a challenge. Eventually, this is like super simplified. I spent a long time on this kind of document analysis piece of my thesis, doing something that was sort of like discourse analysis, but not really. And always like connecting it back to stories from my own practice. What I saw in a really simplified way was that from the origins of the field in the 1980s, there were kind of these two strands. And one was a strand, it very much comes from the United States and the kind of nation at risk kind of discourse, welfare reform, connecting people's literacy levels with the economy. So very much embedded in the notion of risk and at-risk discourse, embedded in the notions of sort of regulatory discourses of mothering, so the idea that if we just taught women to be better mothers, then kids would do better in school, and then we'd have better literacy rates, and then our country would do better economically. And sometimes, like documents from the 1980s and the early 1990s are really blatant about this. Even now, though, that discourse continues to be present, although it's much more subtle. The other thing that's common in this strand is that literacy is defined in relationship to schooling. So what we mean by literacy is whether or not children achieve in standardized tests at grade level appropriate ways, right? And that's how we measure our success. On the other hand, there's this other strand that I was talking about before that came from a kind of ethnographic approach to researching literacy. It was about going into the community and seeing the ways that people used literacy, the ways that they supported each other around issues of literacy, and the ways that literacy impacted them in their lives. And there were programs that kind of were connected to that strand. Again, they tended to be kind of more popular education strand and more participatory. So I started thinking of these two strands as sort of empowerment versus regulatory, but like, this is way too simple, as I said. So these things are like in dialogue with each other. They're constantly present in family literacy work, family literacy research and policy. And together they kind of shape what family literacy is. Okay. Let me go back to that one in a sec and go to this one first. So as I was thinking about this, I was influenced by Wanda Pillow's work. So Wanda Pillow does work that she calls feminist genealogy. And her work is work that's about policy analysis. And in particular, looking at the ways that policies are really about regulating bodies. The work that this stems from is about teen mothers in schools. And so there's very obvious ways in which the kinds of policies that are associated with teen mothers in schools are about regulating bodies. But I began to think about this in the context of my own work. And as I thought about bodies, and I was kind of in family literacy programs looking around the room, something I already knew became really, really evident to me. And that was that usually the woman at the front of the room was a white body, and that the rest of the room, the bodies in the room were brown and black bodies. Like I said, this is not like a huge revelation, and it was something I was aware of going into my work, but it is something that is completely absent from family literacy discourse, or almost completely absent from family literacy discourse. Research, policy, practice, we don't talk about race. And, you know, in research in the K-12 area and research in post-secondary, there's been a movement towards that. There's a history of that, and there's more and more conversation about that. Family literacy, it kind of like, it's on the edge of all of those conversations, but it seems to never really like take the leap into talking about that and addressing it. Documents that are used in the field will talk about culture, they'll talk about language, but never about race. So that just became really obvious to me. Oops, okay, I'm gonna go back to this one. And then I had this experience. So, as I said, I observed in family literacy programs and trainings. And as I was, one of the programs that I observed in was a program specifically for immigrant and refugee mothers. One was a program that was associated with a preschool, and it was just anybody who went to that preschool could come to the family literacy program. And then I was looking for another program. I wanted to observe in a program that took an Aboriginal perspective to family literacy. And I was having trouble finding a program. And one of the women that I was working with in my research invited me to come be part of this traditional Aboriginal parenting program, which was not a family literacy program, but at the same time it certainly had a lot of elements of family literacy programs, and it talked about education, and it seemed appropriate. So she invited me to come participate in this program. The facilitators of the program were both Aboriginal, one was Métis, one was Cree. All of the participants were Aboriginal. And whereas in the other places that I observed, I'd kind of been invited, and people kind of treated me like the researcher and like kind of an expert. Pretty much everybody I worked with I knew in some way, because this is a small place and family literacy is a small field. And so I always kind of had this feeling like they were treating me like a bit of an expert in the program. But in this program, it was like really clear that I was not there to be an expert. I'm not an expert in traditional Aboriginal parenting program. And so I was invited to sit in and participate as a parent, sort of, alongside the parents, listen, learn. And what happened to me at one point in the program was that I was just suddenly aware of that sense of being different than everybody in the room and of not being the expert. being decentered, I guess. And I have used Sarah Ahmed's metaphor of losing my chair to describe this. Sarah Ahmed talks about, I think it's Husserl, it's a phenomenologist that was working in Germany in the 1930s, and he was Jewish, and he had a chair of philosophy, and because he was Jewish, he lost his chair. And so she uses this metaphor for kind of this notion of being displaced and being decentered. And she particularly talks about the ways in which people of color always have this sense of, having lost their chair without ever really having had their chair. So I've used it in a slightly different way to think about the way that my own perspectives shift when I was kind of put to the margins of a conversation and no longer what felt centered. What was kind of weird about this for me is that I had always kind of been aware of race, thinking about relationships in terms of race. And I had often been the only white person in a room of non-white bodies as the teacher. I'd had that experience many times. But when suddenly I was the only white person in the room and I wasn't the teacher, it just literally shifted me, reoriented how I was seeing things. And so this was a huge change in how I saw my research. So back to this photograph. So it says locating my research, you can barely see that. As I said in my defense, I just had this photograph up the whole time of my presentation without any text on it at all. So most of us may have some familiarity with this view out the window. This is from the 5th floor of the library. And it was at some point after I had done all my data collection, I had this experience of kind of losing my chair, that I looked out this window and I saw it in a completely new way. So most of you will be familiar with what is out that window. A lot of people I've talked to have no idea about what this view is. But obviously this is Wascana Center out the window. To the right is Wascana Marsh. And to the left is kind of the more formal part of Wascana Center, and then you can sort of vaguely see the edge of downtown. What struck me at this particular point about this photograph was that it looks natural, but it isn't. I mean, it is, but it isn't. And everything out there is natural, but it's been shaped by colonialism, by colonization. Wascana Marsh, which is, called the natural part of Wascana Center, didn't ever exist there before the creek was dammed and the reservoir was made that became Wascana Lake. The species that live there, a lot of them are native species, but there are also a lot of invasive species, particularly in the marsh. There were farmhouses along the edge of the creek, and so there are European introduced species that have become part of the ecosystem. And so we see kind of these layers of colonization, of indigenous history, of European history that are present in that photograph of the landscape. And when I saw that, for some reason, suddenly, in a moment, I also began to think about all of the sites of my research and the way in which all of those sites were these kinds of spaces that were both colonized and indigenous in these kinds of layers of experience. And this really shifted my perspective on what was happening in the programs. And I was able to go back and look at some of the tensions that I'd identified, and those tensions I'd been thinking of in terms of this empowerment versus regulation, and it didn't really seem to quite be the right description, but it was kind of all I had. And I was able to see it as being something different and something about these layers of experience in a settler colonial landscape. work, which, partly I only arrived at this place, I think, because Jennifer Tupper let me sit in with her on a PhD curriculum seminar. And so I was introduced to these ideas. And part of my thing about talking about this methodology and the journey is that it's sort of hard to explain, because it kind of sounds like I was like completely unaware of colonialism, and then all of a sudden I was like, colonialism, which isn't really how the process was. I was aware of colonialism. I was aware of relationships based in race and all of that. But somehow I just wasn't seeing the significance of that in the way that we had conceptualized and done family literacy work, and the ways in which particular bodies in particular spaces would experience those programs. But once I began to think about that, then Dwayne Donald's work began to seem significant to me in different ways, and the notion of colonial frontier logics and the pedagogy of the fort, or fort pedagogy, seemed really significant. And so I'll read this quote. So, fort pedagogy works according to an insistence that outsiders must be either incorporated, brought inside to become like the insiders, or excluded in order for progress and development to take place in the necessary way. And so if I started to think about family literacy programs as being located sort of within the fort, then what I felt was that our orientation towards family literacy was seen from inside the fort. And so from inside the fort, we have kind of a normalized idea of what families should do around literacy, and it looks like that photograph of me and my children sitting in a chair reading a book, or it looks like, looking for teachable moments and trying to connect them to kind of academic understandings of literacy or numeracy. And so we're in the fort, and that's how we see literacy, and we look outside the fort and we see people do literacy in a different way. And the only thing we can think of to do is to teach them the way we do it so that they can come inside the fort and succeed. And this is maybe sort of when I start to get back to like how newcomers might be part of this sort of relationship to that. I think we see newcomers in the same way. We see them as outside of the fort. And so our notions of what it is to be successfully integrated into Canadian society depend on them adopting the practices of the fort, and that then they can, come inside the fort and be part of what we're doing here. Okay, I think I turned this around now. I'm going to be confused. Oh, there we go. Okay. So, I guess partly what this did is it offered me a new orientation, and so thinking again about metaphors and sort of about bodies and being in spaces. Like it was almost like I literally was looking at, literally was looking at family literacy here, like I was looking at it straight on. And then I could kind of turn all the way around. So I could look at it this way and go, oh, deficit thinking, bad. And I could turn around and look at it from the exact opposite perspective and could say, oh, but there's some strength-based thinking, so that's, different. What kind of the experience of losing my chair, feeling like I was decentered, starting to think about what pedagogy did, was sort of like slant me. So instead I was looking at it from sort of a different angle. And it's like deficit was still there, strength was still there, but I was able to just see ways that we could just let them be there and kind of like go around them or look at the other side of them. In my mind, it felt like a very physical shift. Like really just like I turned in my chair, much like I turned in my chair and looked out the window, like looked away from my computer screen, turned and looked out the window at the view outside the library and saw something different and saw layers there as opposed to just something like flat with no history to it. And from that perspective, I started to think about relationships. So Sarah Ahmed talks in a 2002 article about better relationships. Donald talks quite extensively about ethical relationality. And what I started to talk about was robust respect. So respect is something that many practitioners feel is important in their practice. The relationship do they have to their participants. I was looking for a robust respect, something that would stand up to deficit thinking and still be present. And part of, and sort of the second last chapter of my thesis talks about robust respect and kind of fleshes it out. But a really significant thing about this kind of robust understanding of respect is that it's located in history. So it's like an acknowledgement of those layers of history that exist, you know, in West Canada Center, or that exist kind of in a program room, right? So in this room in the university, in this classroom that's, you know, built around particular understandings of what it is to be literate and what it is to be educated, very much within the fort. But then the fort is kind of set down within another landscape that has layers of history intertwined, really, like Indigenous and white settler history intertwined together, and then the history of other newcomers as well as part of that. Okay, so I really couldn't find a good ending to this presentation, but this is what I had. So this is something from the concluding chapter of my thesis. So when I began to see family literacy practice as being about relationships, about being in relation, I began to see how this approach is always already there in promising moments in the field. So I'm talking about this robustly respectful approach to family literacy practice. It was always in my interviews and my observations, not just in words and actions of practitioners, but also in the words and actions of participants. And I guess, you know, moving forward and still trying to think about, like, what was the methodology of this thesis? What was that journey that, you know, started before my thesis began and ends after sometime? Well, it's continuing on at least 4 months later. So how might this kind of, this slant and this new orientation, this commitment to robust respect, shape how I think about research and how I think about my own position as a former practitioner slash researcher slash, I don't know what's happening next, but you know, mother. And but always bringing it back to being about relationships. So conclude there, I guess.
We have 10 minutes for comments and questions.
Thank you, Tracy.